Ladies and gentlemen, you're very welcome to the Careers Hub. And I suppose over the next hour, can you hear me okay there? It's very hard to get a sense. You can hear at the back. Over the next hour or so, what I suppose I'm going to attempt to do, along with the support of my team, is to give you, I suppose, some insight into what it's like to work for the Farmers Journal, and also not just the Farmers Journal, but the broader industry, because in relation to the skill sets up here, you might be surprised, although we all work in the Farmers Journal, or Mairead here is the editor of Irish Country Living, you might be surprised at the level of journalism qualifications they're sitting in front of you. In terms of my own background, I completed an honours degree. Actually, I completed a higher national diploma, first of all in agriculture, believe it or not, because I didn't get the points to get into agriculture. I then completed an honours degree and started working actually in the meat processing industry in the UK, actually for the company just behind you there, the ABP Food Group. So during those 2-year period, I was with the ABP Food Group. I did every job from buying cattle to killing cattle to boning them out to gutting them to selling the beef. I subsequently left there and had the fortunate opportunity to carry out an off-field farming scholarship, which I received a scholarship for travelling the world, looking at various different types of beef production systems, and subsequently then went to work for Dawn Meats and Chuggas as a beef specialist for 5 years, and then went to got a phone call from Matt Dempsey and asked would I join the Farmers Journal as livestock editor. The previous livestock editor, Jack, I say, had been there for 25, 30 years, so it was sort of taking over a legacy position. And I did that job for 7 years before becoming editor of the Farmers Journal, and then 12 months after that becoming CEO of the Agricultural Trust as well. I suppose to make that story even a bit more out of kilter, ladies and gentlemen, I'm also actually dyslexic, so I'm probably the most unqualified person in my position you could actually be. And I say that only not to any sort of great achievement, but to give any one of you there or standing outside confidence that if you have the right work ethic and you have the hunger and you have the drive and you have the ability to communicate and present yourself, there are opportunities, and there are real opportunities in this industry. And I certainly am very proud of the team that I lead. The Agricultural Trust employs around 100 people full-time, and then we have a team of part-time staff as well. And we produce the Irish Farmers Journal. We produce Irish Country Living in that. We produce the Irish Dairy Farmer. We're bringing out the Irish Beef Farmer. And one title that we're very proud of is in the middle of the recession, we brought out Irish Country Magazine, spearheaded by this woman here on my left. And within 4 years, it became the largest selling women's interest magazine in the country, and currently today holds that title along with Consumer Magazine of the Year, Mairead, as well, and Consumer Journalist of the Year as well. So we have a very broad team and a very broad skill set. And what I want to get, guys, or try to get across to you here in this session is actually just the broad skill set and the broad background that each of the team members here have. I just introduced our news editor. To my far left is Patrick Donoghue. Patrick, and you'll find this is a common theme, Longford man. Not that they're all from Longford. Very slow to count in Longford, as we know, over the last couple of days. But Patrick's also farming in his own right as well. Salem O'neill is our market specialist and knows all and covers all our area around the industry, around trade talks, around Mercosur, Brazil. Phelim is off to China, Phelim? China and Japan now in a couple of weeks' time. And again, Phelim lives on a farm also. Mairead Lavery, our editor of Irish Country Living and managing editor of Irish Country Magazine, the dynamo of the Farmers Journal, and I'm sure a lot of you will hear on the Moncrief show and News Talk as well, and a fantastic ambassador for Irish agriculture. And believe it or not, Mairead Lavery also lives on a farm. To my right is Jack Kennedy. I should say Dr. Jack Kennedy. Jack, as he goes through his own career. Jack is a PhD. I'll let him go into that. Jack is my deputy editor, my right-hand man in terms of the Farmers Journal, getting the Farmers Journal out every week. And Jack looks after the livestock team and all things to do with livestock. And Jack Kennedy lives on a farm as well. Beside that, I have Owen Lowry, and believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, that's not actually fake tan. Owen has passport, will travel, is just back from Saudi, spent 5 weeks in Brazil just at the end of last year, and I'm sure has a very ambitious travel plan again for the rest of the year. And that's something, ladies and gentlemen, that we're very proud of in the Agricultural Trust, in that we will invest in our staff to get them out, to get them across the world, to bring back the technologies, the ideas, and communicate them and filter them down into Irish agriculture. Oh yes, and Owen Lowry lives on a farm as well, well at the weekend anyway. And on the far right, we have James Maloney. James is our machinery editor, joined us in the last few years. James looks after the whole side of the machinery team. We have really exciting plans for our machinery coverage, James, in the next few months. James does a lot of trial work with machines. His opinion on machines is very well thought of. And yes, again, James Maloney lives on a farm. So you can get a feel, and I must say it's not a prerequisite that you have to live on a farm, but our staff tend to live and breathe what they do as well, and that's something that's very important to us. Patrick, maybe if I could come to you first of all as our news editor, maybe just give, and I'll ask each of the team, just 60-second snapshot of who Patrick Donoghue is, what you do, and the main element of your role.
Sure, yeah, thanks, Justin. From a suckler farm, I run a suckler farm in County Longford, so we're of severely disadvantaged proportions there. Just in charge of the general setting the news agenda for the Farmers Journal, both in print and online, and making sure that what you see in the paper, essentially in the first 20 pages every week, is relevant to as many farmers as possible. We can't be all things to all men and women, but we do try and cover every sector as much as possible. My own background, I suppose I fell into journalism, as I like to call it. I'd be less of a specialist. I've scraped through a degree in English in UCD, failed first-year exams, failed second-year exams, and got there in the third year. And then worked in public relations in that sector for 7 years. Won 4 PR awards for there. I worked for Bill O'Herlihy, who has unfortunately since passed from us. Worked for him for 5 years. I worked for the Irish Cattle and Sheep Farmers Association as their head of communications for a couple of years. And then I worked in Dublin, London and Brussels for a PR company back in Dublin. All the while I was writing all the time for the Irish Examiner and the university paper and stuff like that. So writing is what I want to do, and when you can combine agriculture and writing, then the two of them came together. So again, very lucky, no more than anybody else. It was during the horse meat scandal. I was working on behalf of Burger King, and I just got speaking to my predecessor, Pat O'Keefe, to see if I could write an article. There happened to be somebody leaving at the time. I came in for a 2-day trial. I made a good cup of tea and they haven't kicked me out since. So all going well, and progressed up to it to be news editor in the last kind of 9 or 10 months. So I'd be very much of the opinion that better to be lucky than good. In many instances you do need a break, but hard work is probably the one that would get it, and the greatest skill of all is being a spoofer. That's me.
I'm not sure Patrick had all that detailed in the CV when he applied for the job, but anyway, we better do a background check. Phelim, over to you. You look after our market specialist side of the house, and I suppose you've had quite a diverse career as well.
Yeah, Justin, it would be fair to say that I took the scenic route to the Farmers Journal. Started off on a small farm in County Tyrone up north. Went to college in Belfast to Queen's, where I studied law for 4 years. Never had any ambition to practice, or maybe never the ability to practice, but it's long ago enough now that I can gloss over it. Spent basically my entire working career up until this time last year in or around the red meat processing industry. First 12 years of it in the meat factory, the second 8 years in the levy body up north, the Livestock and Meat Commission. I would then have ran the Northern Ireland Meat Exporters, the trade association for the meat processing industry up north prior to joining the Journal. And I suppose with the journal, it's a case of trying to share whatever bit of knowledge and experience and context that it would have across the global red meat industry in particular, but increasingly with the difficulties in pig meat in recent times, we have to take an interest, a bigger interest in that as well. It's a case of trying to bring that knowledge back to the readers of the Farmers Journal, to the Irish farmers. And more importantly, I suppose we all hear about these trade talks in the news, but the essential information, an essential part of our brief, is to try and distill that down as to what that quite complex negotiation actually means for an Irish farmer that's milking the cow, that's producing the lamb or the beef bullock across the country.
Phelan, what advice, just when I have you here, obviously you've changed career, and this has been you've been with us now around 12 months?
Just over a year,
Just over a year now. And a big step to change career at that stage. What gave you the confidence to do it? And what made you take that leap to move from, I suppose, the meat processing industry into journalism?
I suppose I often ask myself that question, Justin. To be honest, to be frank about it, I think it's and I would encourage anyone at any stage of their career to be open-minded about new things. I wouldn't suggest for a moment that you go to a job and decide after 6 weeks or indeed 6 months that you don't like it, but I think it should be your ambition after a period of time, and I always think of 10 years as the ideal mark point, to be willing and ready to look at something different. And I suppose I look around, one of the things I discovered, Justin, on joining the Journal, I took a quick look around the place and discovered that I was one of the more senior members of staff, shall we say, even if that wasn't in the context of time served. And I think it is the secret of eternal youth to some extent, or that's what I keep telling myself, to be open-minded to new things, to take on new challenges, to stretch yourself into areas that you're not particularly maybe that comfortable with initially. If you get and accomplish the challenge of making yourself comfortable and able to deal with them, I think, and I find that personally very rewarding.
Okay. Mairead Lavery. Mairead, obviously, as I said, edits our Irish Country Living. And I think, Mairead, you have a very interesting story to tell about your own background, the career break element with family, and also then getting back in to where you are today.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, an awful lot of women, particularly my age, you know, they've taken time out to have kids, or, you know, they gave up work after they got married or something like that. And it is usually and can be a very difficult road back into full employment. In my case, I grew up on a dairy farm in Wicklow, went to college in Limerick, did European studies down in UL, fell in love, spent a few years in Dublin working with IBM as a systems engineer, which sounds like as if it's nuts and bolts, but it's actually not. It's more software development. Went into sales and marketing there, and then you know, ended up marrying that kind of Limerick Cork Kerryman and moving on to a farm in Limerick. And for us, it was an important issue that when twins arrived kind of 13 months later, that I was there to care for them. And it would have been very difficult for me to continue my career in IBM. My twins are now 28. There was very little childcare in those days. You know, it was really, really difficult. Mine wasn't a 9-to-5 job. You'd have been away a lot. So I really knuckled down to farming. We had sheep, we kept cattle. I was the full-time farmer. I know one year I lambed down 208 ewes, which anyone in here now would find quite a challenge to do, as well as minding 2 that were under 2-year-old, and plus another 40 cattle. But I was really engaged in my community, involved in leader, involved in local development boards, in community councils, all of that, and absolutely enjoyed it. And then Charlie McCreevy brought in a thing called individualisation. Hands up, anybody here who remembers individualisation? Yes, some of you do. Individualisation basically penalised stay-at-home spouses. And because I'd been involved in IFA, I knew Matt Dempsey, and I rang Matt and I ranted and raved about this individualisation. And Matt said, you feel strongly about it, you know something about it, write me 300 words or 400 words. And I did. And a couple of weeks later, he called back and he said, was there anything else I felt strongly about? And I did. My mother had spent 23 hours on an A&E trolley inside in St. Vincent's Hospital, and it was like Calcutta, and I couldn't believe it, and I wrote about that. And within a matter of weeks, I'd been offered a job in the Journal. And but I didn't take it. I stayed doing my voluntary stuff for another year or two, and then they coaxed me back in, and I came, and I have never regretted it. I have found it to be really a most fascinating journey. And in the Agricultural Trust, hard work is rewarded. initiative. You know, coming up with ideas is really important. And one of those ideas 5 years ago now, was Irish Country Magazine. And as Justin said, you know, how do you start a magazine in the middle of a recession? But we did. It's won Consumer Magazine of the Year twice. And I mean, I don't have a degree in journalism, but what I do have is kind of an instinct. And, you know, trust your instinct, and especially when it comes to jobs and careers. Because, you know, the offers, the positions are there. You just have to believe that, yeah, you can fill them. And I know when I joined the Journal first and was working on the news desk, it mattered to me. I didn't have an ag science degree. Oh my God, how could I possibly work in the Journal without an ag science degree? So what I did was I entered competitions and we won them, you know, won the awards. And that was me then. That was my equivalent of the ag science degree, and proof that I could do the job. So
Maria,
anyway, just initiative and keep working hard.
What one piece of advice would you give anybody here today that was in the same position maybe as you were in 20 years ago, that had, okay, maybe been concentrating on rearing the family,
Yeah.
and now if starting the family are starting to obviously fend for themselves?
Don't take no for an answer. You will get turned down the first time. You'll get turned down the second time. I remember when Charlie McCreevy brought in that individualisation, I contacted Foss the next morning, told him I was a systems engineer in IBM and I needed to be retrained to go back into that kind of position. And I was told in no short terms that the only thing they could offer me was socialization, basically how to speak to adults. And there was nothing else they had for me, and I wasn't going to qualify. I sent out my CV to 3 or 4 job agencies down in Limerick. One had the grace to ring me back, and they said I was too old and my skills were too out of date. So, you know, don't take no. Keep going, keep trying. And the no's will hit you, and the no's will put you down. But you have to be able to stand up again and keep going. And that would be my message to women who want to reskill, to women who are thinking maybe of moving down the country with their partner. One of you have a job, the other hasn't. You just don't, you know, you don't die at the first fence. You keep going. And there is an opening there.
Jack Kennedy, dairy editor, deputy editor of the Farmers Journal, farmer, industry analyst. How did you get into all of that?
From a farm in South Tipperary, Justin, and I suppose again to kind of to verify Mairead's point, we didn't have cows at home. We had everything else but cows, dairy cows. Tillage, calves, sheep, everything else but dairy cows. So I spent my time and my summers then when I was younger on my on my uncle and aunt's farms, dairy farms. They had dairy farms in North Tipperary, and I used to go up there and spend the summers up there milking cows. So that's what really kind of started me in terms of my interest in the dairy sector. So I always wanted to do something related to agriculture. I didn't know what it was, but I always wanted to do something related to agriculture. And then as the agri door opened, I wanted to be dairy, more and more dairy. For what reason, I don't know. Maybe I saw, I suppose, a future in it, a kind of a sustainable future for dairy here in Ireland. But I wanted to do something in dairy. So I did ag science in UCD, did my degree 4 years. And then I went to a small company based down in Cork, Durapack Agri. And I travelled the country for, give or take, 12 months selling black plastic for round bale silage. So I started off in that, and obviously that gave me a feel for the industry and what was involved. But I always wanted to do more in dairy specifically. So I applied then to do a master's and a PhD in Moore Park. So effectively, what that meant, it sounds very good, but effectively all I spent 3 years doing was putting my hand up inside dairy cows.
Careful, Jack.
Yep. Taking out what was coming out, measuring what was happening, looking at cows grazing on grass, feeding them different levels of concentrate, looking at the responses, etc., and that kind of thing to what was happening on those dairy farms, measuring it, writing it up, and trying to take messages out of that for dairy farms. So then I sent away my CV to a couple of the companies that are featured around here. I sent one to Liam Wolfe and to Jim Wolfe, and none of them wanted me. So Matt Dempsey put up his hand and he said, come up for a chat. So I went up to Matt, who, as you know, is standing here at the back. I'm going to embarrass him even more now. And he said, I want to employ you as on and off editor, part-time working role. And I said, look at Matt, I've spent 3 or 4 years now in the dairy side of things. I want to focus on the dairy side of things. So I said, look, I'd prefer not to have a role in the part-time farming section. I wanted the dairy side of things. So I was doing what Mairead said. I was kind of saying no, but leaving the door open effectively. So Matt rang me that night and he said, Jack, look, do up 1,500 words on the spring of 2001 or the spring of 2000. It had been a very bad weather year. And he said, look, do up in terms of a little bit of a report in terms of what happened on dairy farmers during that period when weather was bad and prices were poor, etc., and that kind of thing. So I did that, and he said, I sent it up to him, and he said, a day later he rang and said, listen, come up for another chat. So we had a chat, and he gave me another job, and I'm there since, to be honest with you. So look, I mean, that was my career. I always wanted to do something in agri, first of all, and then I suppose I kind of narrowed it down and said I want to do something in dairy specifically. And look, I'm still there, but obviously I'm kind of maybe branching out a little bit more into other sectors now again.
Jack,
yeah, that's
one of the things you're doing now, and you've gone from, I suppose, being dairy editor where you had it was yourself on the dairy side. Okay, you brought on Aidan Brennan onto that, but now as deputy editor, you're managing a wider team. And maybe for people there that are mid-career, that are moving up, and suddenly it's not all about what they can do, it's about what they can get out of other people as well. Maybe to give your experience on that.
Yeah, I mean, it is a completely kind of a different role, I suppose. And like you said, first of all, we had to develop a team for the journal that could still cater for dairy farmers. So Aidan Brennan and Paddy Kelly and, we've numerous other contributors to the dairy section to provide, I suppose, that database, that bank of knowledge for dairy farmers that's still there. I suppose when you move up to kind of managing other people, I mean, effectively for me, Justin, it's kind of how you relate to them, how you can kind of communicate with them, because you do need to be constantly, talking to them. There's only so much an email can do, or there's only so much a phone call can do, but I mean, you really have to kind of relate to the people that you're working with on a day-to-day basis to try and get them to do it themselves, but maybe in a fashion that you want it done, that kind of a way. But I mean, essentially it has to come from them. The initiative has to come from them. They have to do it. You can't do it for them. So you have to, I suppose, empower them with the skills and with the equipment, first of all, to make it happen. But then just give them tasters, I suppose, of what you might like them to see or what you might like to see in it.
Owen, in terms of your own career, Owen is now our agri-business editor, ladies and gentlemen, and he basically probes, analyses, challenges, supports agri-business companies in terms of looking at their financial accounts, saying where they should be going, trying to develop a strategic plan. But Owen, your career has taken you down a number of different lines before you've actually got to the Farmers Journal. Maybe talk to us about that and where your background comes from.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Justin. I suppose a little bit like everyone else on the panel, I grew up on a tillage farm. Grew up by my father's side, going to farm walks, IFA protests, sitting in the kitchen at home, listening to the sales rep come out selling chemicals or fertilizer to the farmer or to my father. And I suppose I got a great passion for the industry at that early young age. And by the time it came to me picking my CEO course, I decided that I wanted to do agriculture, and it was no question about it. And I wanted to be like the guy that sat at the table selling the chemicals and the fertilizer. I wanted to work for a merchant and walk crops. How did I end up here is a good question. So I suppose went to UCD, did ag science. And ag science, at that stage, you had to do animals and you had to do crops. I didn't want to do animals, had to do it. And probably was a blessing in disguise in some ways because it gave me, Ireland is a grass country. It's a huge animal base, so I got a good understanding of all the sector. Came out of ag science anyway, wanted to focus more on crops. I wanted to do a cereals masters, and unfortunately I didn't get the grades to do the cereals masters with Tom McCabe and UCD, so I went to the next best thing, the sugar beet industry. And I hold the proud title of being the last person to do a sugar beet masters in Ireland, because just as I finished that, the sugar beet industry closed down. But luckily, I also studied fertilizer in my master's, so I said, right, sugar beet gone, let's look at the fertilizer industry. Now, I suppose I'm a little bit, in some ways, unique in that I've never applied for a job, or never gotten a job that I've applied for, but I've always gotten a job. So I was brought on a tour over to France with a group of farmers, and on that tour there was a cup of coffee, and the cup of coffee was an interview to work for a French fertilizer company based in Ireland at the time. So succeeded through that and got the job and started as product manager with them. Had to learn French through that job and translate products that were in France and bring them into Ireland. Very exciting role. That was my first step into the fertilizer industry. Did that for a year. Ended up then, the position was going to be finished. So I was faced with a dilemma, told on a Friday. On a Saturday morning, I got a phone call to say that there's a company in Wexford looking for someone to go walking crops for them. And I said, right, great, I'm going to go apply for this. Went down there, did it for 3 months, realised this dream of mine is not what I wanted to do anymore. So I did that for 3 months, and I went to my boss, did the harvest, took in grain, sampling grain, very long hours. I went to my boss and I said, I actually don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to Thailand for a month. I'll be back, and when I come back, I'd like to work for the fertilizer side of the company, which was Target Fertilizers. So started there, putting up invoices, doing general clerical work, operations, logistics, moved up through the ranks. Felt then at that stage my science degree wasn't enough, went back to college, did an MBA part-time at night in Smurfit for 2 years, and came out of that, and I was going to leave. And then I was offered the job as managing director of the company at the age of 28. So did that job for the last 5 years within the company. I suppose that job brought me all around the world to buy fertilizer. 50% of my time was buying fertilizer, the other 50 was trying to sell the stuff. And it was a great, exciting time. But I suppose I came to a point in my career where I felt I had learned as much as I could learn, and I was very much in a fertilizer silo. And I wanted to explore the rest of the industry that was happening. I heard a lot of buzz about dairy quotas going, and I felt there was a lot more growth and export potential, because remember, we export about 80-90% off this island. So I wanted to see, well, what could be done in a more international capacity. And I decided that I'd leave, but I didn't really have that much of a plan of what I was going to do. And it's just, again, funny where life brings you. And it's not that I had a plan, but I was always out there at events like this or at the ploughing championship and within the industry, and bumped into Justin, and Justin and myself had a chat, hit it off, I think, and here I am, 2 years later as agribusiness editor. But I suppose my advice, and the piece that I like about this job so much, is that it allows me to communicate and meet so many different various people around the world. And there's one thing that kind of goes throughout my career, and there's only one thing, and I think that's relationships, and building relationships and having a network. And if there's anything else that I could tell anyone here today, it's to keep yourself out there, and no matter who you meet or who asks you for a cup of coffee, to go for that cup of coffee, because you never know where it might lead you down the road. So I think, Justin, that's my...
Just to ask you a question and on that whole networking side, because last year you were president of the Agricultural Science Association as well, and you used the ASA as a network for yourself to actually keep in touch, keep up to speed in terms of what was happening. How important was that year for you?
Yeah, so I think, like ASA, it's an association of 1,700 people who have done ag science in Ireland. And to me, that's the common thread, again, that has been there throughout the various roles that I've held throughout my career. But what it has done for me is open me up to people that I mightn't know, who's in the banking sector, or who's in the financial services sector, who have done ag, or where people have done. Because if you go into the grain industry or the fertilizer industry, you end up talking and meeting just that industry particularly. So what it allowed me to do was to network across the industry into new sectors, and even back to farmers, so that you have a greater understanding. And that's a great benefit to me in my job, what I do today, that I can understand and I can pick up the phone to someone within any sector of the agricultural sector.
I think, ladies and gentlemen, you can see a common thread coming through, in that one of the policies of the journal for its specialists have been to pull people out who have walked the walk and done the talk, whether it be through their PhDs or through their careers, and in terms of can actually authoritatively speak and give opinion that's valued and that is accurate in terms of harvesting the knowledge that they've built up in maybe previous careers. James, in terms of harvesting that knowledge, you certainly harvested a knowledge in your previous career of how to communicate. Maybe if you just take us through And again, you in the last few years, you've significantly changed the direction of your career coming onto the journal.
Yeah, that's right, Justin. Just a quick summary of where I come from. I'm a neighbour of Owen's, a tillage farmer. I did, like him, aspire to be the sales rep in the black golf going down the road selling a pallet of fertiliser. But I did start off, like Jack as well. I was chasing Jack Kennedy down the road in a black Mondeo selling black stylo wrap plastic. So I've seen all facets of it as well. And I'm probably one of the few people that had to leave the IFA for an increase in salary as well, but won't say a whole lot more about that. We're moving on. Where I came from then is basically from the education side in Chagas. I spent 12 years, permanent pensionable job, brilliant job, I have to say. Met a huge amount of young people, and I'm just actually seeing them walking by, which is brilliant to see them here today. They're coming back, they're looking to further their career, looking to change it. And I would say don't be afraid of anyone to change their career. If you if you like something or if you have a passion for it, you'll always naturally levitate. That's your comfort state. That's where you bring yourself back towards. And although I had my degree in crops, I always had a natural love of machinery. And my mum often joked with me, my first words were international tractor and not dada and mama. So I went back, and that's where I'm comfortable with. The knowledge, my job in the journal is not all that different to what I did as a teacher. I think all I have to do is to gather all the information that I can and put it in a readable, factual fashion for ye every week, and to communicate with the readers to improve the content or improve the quality of the paper. Going on from that, it's like going. I've got the opportunity to travel. I've been in India, I've been in France, I've been in most countries in Europe, Spain, and just to see that farmers are the same nearly. They're looking for the same kind of outcome all over. We're a bit different in Ireland. Okay, we've loads of grass, we've good yields. But generally the farmer, if you break down the language barrier with a farmer in Eastern Europe, you're very, very similar people, very, very similar creatures. And that's really important because it makes this pool where we work in, it's such a small industry. And even to take it out to European-wise, it's even smaller. And I think it's a great opportunity. And for anyone interested in a career in agriculture, it's absolutely, I couldn't recommend it highly enough. There is opportunities for everybody at every level. And just from the machine side of it, there's opportunities for people on a service level with a local dealer. If you want to move on then, there's opportunities with Class, Agco, John Deere, huge opportunities. And
James, you mentioned it on Owen, I might come back to you on it, just going back down across. You mentioned travel. How important is travel in relation to upskilling yourself and constantly, because one of the big challenges is this technology is moving so fast. I get into a tractor today and could hardly recognize it from the one I grew up in. How do you keep yourself up to speed, and how important is travel and networking and communicating to actually be able to do that?
It's vital, Justin, because often things, okay, it might be out in the continent first, so you might see a new GPS system. And a big thing in France at the minute is they're moving towards precision agriculture. Stuff that's been integrated in cover crops, and that's leaking back to here. So it's and coming straight from the manufacturer, you get the opportunity to have a kind of I won't say the upper hand, but you kind of a feeling of what's coming back here that could be a benefit to an Irish farmer. That's something that might have felt an alien concept. If someone mentioned to me 10 years ago that a tractor was going to steer itself down the field and I didn't have to worry about driving straight, I'd probably say you're mad, like. But after spending an hour on a tractor that drives straight and has perfect tram lines, I'd say it's the only way to go. So it's vital, really.
It's a standing joke in our office, ladies and gentlemen, that Owen Larry, you put a camera or offer him a dinner and he'll be there. In relation to travel, Owen, maybe give the audience a little insight into maybe your travel plans the last 6 months, where you plan to go maybe in the next 6 months.
Okay, so I suppose the way I work with Justin is I book the flights and then I go into Justin's office and I say, Justin, is it okay if I go to... but I'm a big believer in getting the hands dirty, get the feet on the ground and get into the market. Again, remembering that this industry is built on exports. 90% of our stuff goes off the island. We need to understand, and particularly in my job, I need to understand what are the consumers in the world wanting and what are the opportunities for Irish agriculture in the world. No point sitting in an office trying to read it off the internet. And I think this is the biggest challenge for all agribusinesses, is to get people and put them into the market and have people that will, deeply understand what's needed and then translate that information back to the processing sector here or to farmers, that this is what's needed. Just to give a flavour of where I've travelled in the last 6 months, I suppose I spent that time in Brazil. Again, why did I go to Brazil? Brazil, for me, is the engine of agriculture production in the world. It's not that we may export to this country, but it's the biggest producer of soybean, second biggest producer of wheat. It's a big producer of dairy. We need to understand what our real competition is when we're out and trying to export food. I was out in Saudi last week. Again, a huge Middle East region is a massive opportunity for Irish agribusiness. A lot of talk about China at the moment, but for me, it's these secondary countries that are as important, like Africa, Middle East, even some of the closer ones in Eastern Europe. We need to be aware of how these people consume food. They're not eating cheddar. They're eating different types of cheeses that are local to them. So we have to stop maybe, we need to look at what we're producing. Yep, Jack?
Jack, I suppose the same applies to you.
And the one point, I agree 100% with what Owen and James, but I think travel when you're young, when you have a chance and when you're not locked into something in terms of commitments, whether it's life or whether it's work. I mean, in terms of work experience, it's a great opportunity, I'd say, Justin, for all the young people that are traveling this hall. Like, I went to Holland for 6 months milking cows, then I went over to northern Germany milking cows for 6 months. A completely different setup to what's here in Ireland, but it gives you knowledge, it gives you a competitive edge over someone else that you can use to further your career, and obviously the experience that the lads have talked about.
Mairead, speaking of that competitive edge, Mairead looks after our intern program. We take on 6 interns every year, and inevitably they tend to come back into the Farmers Journal in some form. Mairead, what sets the intern that you decide to take on apart from maybe all the other people that present to you or that you receive their CVs?
Well, hello, yeah.
Yeah.
If an intern comes in and they absolutely know nothing about the Farmers Journal and they haven't bothered to find out, well, they're not going anywhere, really. What we're looking for, really, is people who have an easy manner. In the journal, you have to talk to people. You spend all your time talking to people and building relationships. And it's those kind of people we're looking for. We've had a very successful intern program. We advertise in October. We do interviews in November, December. And we have people starting from January onwards. They come from Ag Science out in UCD, from Waterford IT. They come from Limerick. They come from DCU, UCD. Right across the spectrum and right across the disciplines. For instance, our careers and education editor, whose gorgeous photograph you see there as you come in the door, Mary Phelan. Mary comes from a law background in UCD, and she came in as an intern. So, it's like a long 3-month interview. In some cases, it goes on for 6 months. A lot of our online team now are also coming from that intern experience. And, it works really well. And it works for both sides. And if you know people, young people who would be interested, do make sure they apply next October.
Patrick, and I just want to bring you into that, how things are changing. And Mairead mentioned the online team. Sure. Your job has changed hugely, even since you've taken over in the last 9 months. Even coping with that change in relation, gone from a 5-day-a-week news business to now 7 in the morning to 10 at night, 7 days a week on farmersjournal.ie. How do you handle that change as somebody at your stage in their career?
I would even say that when I started 3 years ago, that 5 days would have been pushing it. We had a print deadline on a Wednesday. We started really thinking about the paper on a Monday. We'd start getting it all together on a Tuesday, and then all hell would break loose and trying to make the deadline for 4 o'clock on Wednesday in the hope to get the paper out and in the shops on the Thursday. And in that time now, we've gone from solely focused on getting a print paper out to a position now where we have, only in the last kind of 6 or 7 months and 8 months since we've taken over, we have somebody starting at 7 o'clock in the morning. They work until 3. Somebody takes over at 12 and works till 9. And even past that. So we've gone to a position now where we were, once a week, a one-day wonder essentially, where that now we have to perform. And the way that the news dynamic is shifting in general is now where that, there's this push to go online. There's a push to be first and fast and to be the best. And that's what we have to do. So it's gone from very much of just catering for as much as you could on a Thursday morning to having to do everything that you would get in on a Thursday, but do it every single day. Because, the way the news dynamic and the way kind of the news agenda is going in Ireland, it's moving more online. The print is obviously going to be a hugely important aspect for us, but it's a changing dynamic, and it's a very exciting one. As Maria had said, a couple of the interns who we've taken in over the last couple of years have come back in, are working on our online desk, are working on our print desk. So that I couldn't echo that enough. That the internship, I know it's had its detractors in other sectors, but with us, they really work. If you come in, you use it as a 3-month CV. You work hard. And you get paid. Very important. The rewards are there. We've seen it. It happens. It isn't just come in, think about having a bit of crack when you're in third year in UCD and then leaving again. People are rewarded, and we've some exceptionally good people in working on our online desk now.
Phelim, I'm going to put you on the spot because I know you have kids going into finishing up in education, going into employment. What advice would you give any parents here in relation to the potential that agriculture, the agri-food sector offers in terms of their kids going actually into this sector?
I think it was fascinating just listening to my two colleagues over there. Their aspiration for a career in the agri industry was to get into that black golf and be a rep going around the country selling a product. There's so much more and there's so many options in the agri industry. Starting off, whether it's on a farm basis or working on a farm basis or managing a farm basis, either here or abroad. There's a huge processing industry across all the sectors, whether it's in dairy, beef, sheep, specialised sheep, pork. All of those present opportunities. The other thing too that parents, in terms of giving advice to children, and I'd have given it myself, it's not just about going into a creamery and stacking shelves with butter or working on a slaughter line. There are a multitude of skills, whether it's in IT, whether it's in HR, whether it's in accounting. Basically, every skill is accommodated in the agri-food processing industry. So it is certainly a sector that is sometimes overlooked. No kid perhaps wants to grow up and work in the local meat factory, and yet that is where some of the very best paying jobs and the most rewarding careers are to be had.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm being told to wrap it up because we have a series of events taking place here. I suppose, what are the key messages? For me, ladies and gentlemen, the best advice I can give you is about preparing yourself and getting yourself having the correct knowledge when you go into an interview or you go to present yourself for a job. And obviously, certainly, and I would say this, but if you're looking at the agri sector and want to get a feel, and as Owen said, some of the stuff he brings back about market analysis, obviously the Farmers Journal will provide you with an element of that. I suppose, ladies and gentlemen, the other element of it as well is, as Maria says, don't take no for an answer. And one thing I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, for all of these candidates sitting to my left, or guys sitting to my left or right, and I see some of our own team in the audience and outside as well, is work ethic. Your job is 9 to 5. Your career is the hours you put in after that. And to push yourself on and to as I say, not take no for an answer. Ladies and gentlemen, we have over 1,000 jobs here on offer around the hall today. This is an industry that you can trust your future career in. It's an industry that generates 26 billion euros of economic activity throughout rural Ireland. It's an industry that has grown its exports from 8.5 billion to 10.6 billion right throughout this recession. By coming into agriculture, by coming into the agri-food sector, you can be assured of a career if you display, of a very good career, if you display the right attributes and are prepared to roll up your sleeves and get on with the job and do what's necessary. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude by thanking Open Air for their support of this event, and we have an excellent lineup of speakers here on the stage over the course of the day. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. I hope you find it informative. Thank you very much.